Right, let's get going. It's great to see you. We're back for the 9th summit session, just the last day. I hope you've been enjoying it, and thank you for all your comments and the various retweets on Twitter and your emails. That's been great. So those of you watching on replay, you can put your comments in the chat box just as if you were talking to us live, and those comments stroke questions come through to us on email, so we will get back to you. So welcome if you're on the replay, but also welcome obviously if you're watching live. So today's topic is all about how do you deliver projects successfully, and I'm going to be joined in a moment by David Walker and Nigel Langhorne. Just two bits of housekeeping to see to. The first is hashtag changemakers if you'd like to follow along on Twitter or send us a comment or send us a question. And the other one is, as I've said all week, we are live on the World Wide Web, which comes with its own technical challenges on occasion. So if we lose you, we'll be right back. We're working furiously to get back as quick as we can. But most of the week it's been good, and I'm sure we'll be fine today. Okay, so I'm just going to hand over to David and Nigel just to say hello, and then I'll tell you what we're going to be covering today. David.
Hi everybody, I'm David Walker. I'm in my background. Spent 10 years working around large organisations on control and governance and security type issues. Somewhere along here I qualified as an accountant, but I always contend that I'm not boring. Building on all of that in the last 20 odd years, continuing to try and to get people to do things they really don't want to do sometimes. I'm working as a program and project manager and consultant, and really interested in what makes projects and programs tick. Nigel.
Hi everybody, my name's Nigel Langhorne. I did 35 years in the Royal Navy before leaving and starting my own business for a while. I've then done about 4 years in the NHS as a senior manager, and now I'm running my own business again. And throughout that period, I've been involved in all sorts of programs and projects, particularly in my latter years in the Navy, some very large cross-Navy programs, and also in the NHS I was involved. My first job was the transformation program manager for a major change program in the NHS. So got experience in a number of different sectors, and have, as part of my business, have taught project management and how to implement it on a number of occasions to different clients. So that's where I'm coming from.
Brilliant, thank you guys. So what are we going to be covering today? Well, we're going to start with understanding when to use a project management approach. So very fundamental, but it's key to you getting off on the right foot. So then we'll have a look at why some projects fail, and you'll be surprised that there's a larger percentage of projects fail to achieve their original objectives than you might otherwise normally believe. Then David's going to cover the 4 R's of how to be successful, and I'm sure you'll get lots of insights there. Then Nigel will have a look at introducing the Delta project management approach, which we use inside the Changemaker group. And finally, we'll introduce the team-based project management approach so that you've got a sense of what we can do to support you in your projects, but also to give you some tips that you can actually put in place today. So that's our intention, is to give you something usable you can take back into the workplace this afternoon and make a difference on your project. Okay, to kick us off, I've got a question for Nigel, which is, what's the benefit of using a project management approach?
Well, what a great question, Simon. And I think, to me, I think it's really quite important that we do differentiate between project management and what you might call business as usual. Lots of organisations are running processes and procedures that are part of their everyday business and business as usual. And you could, if you want to, call those projects, but I think it's more important that we look at projects as something that's actually a structured system of getting from a start position to an end position, so from A to B. And I think it's really important that there's some element of significant change involved. So it is a change maker problem for us. It's a good approach for any activity that can be clearly defined. So if we can articulate a clear start position and end point. And I think the other thing is that if we put it into a project management structure, then there's good clear accountability of actually who's in charge, who's responsible for the output and the results. The other good thing about it is that invariably with a project, if you set it up properly, you do get resource allocation. So very often, and I'm sure we've all been there, where it's you've got your job role and you've got your roles and responsibilities, but occasionally somebody will say, "Oh, could you just do this?" But you're expected to do it in the same resource envelope with no extra time, money, or people. And I think if you do put it into a project management system, then somebody somewhere is going to be forced to allocate resources to it, so it gives you a clear resource allocation. I think the other key point is that it's almost certainly got to be on a proven business case. So there's got to be some really good reason for doing it. You know, have we actually identified what is the change we want? And if we have, then this is a good way of ensuring success and delivery. And as part of that, it's all about clear aims and objectives. So there's got to be a very clear aim, very clear set of objectives for a project management approach. But that all sounds a bit sort of processy, which it is. But actually, I think it's worth remembering that project management is not just a science. It's not just a process. There is actually quite a lot of art that goes behind project management. And I know this is something that David's quite keen on. So perhaps pass over to David for a discussion on the art of project management.
Yeah, I think what Simon Nigel then said, it's really a passion of mine. It's about people stop change. When you've got people involved in any process, they have their egos, their personalities, they have their personal challenges outside of work, inside work, in all of their various aspects of their lives. And so it's people that stop change. We've got to deal with working through any project, and Nigel talked about we know where we start, we know where we want to end, but we've got to take people with us. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today inevitably is going to talk about that. I've got a really, really, really great story. Loads and loads of years ago, Roger Enrico was the CEO of PepsiCo, and he always said, "Well, the key for making the organisation change is there's nothing harder than the soft stuff." And we need to always think about that. The soft stuff is really, really, really tough. And we're going as we talk through today, I'm sure we'll come back to that. Simon, you're on mute, Simon.
Thank you, David.
That's okay.
So I think we're going to go into a poll, which is what are the key reasons why projects fail? So would you like to do the poll before you consider that question or afterwards?
No, give us the poll, please, Simon.
Okay, so I'm just loading up a poll for everybody on the call. You want to just quickly vote?
I think it's about our biggest challenges, isn't it, really?
On your current project? Is it too much bureaucracy, insufficient budget, lack of sponsorship, lack of clear objective, or insufficient engagement? Because I think what the guys are going to be discussing with you is how some of these big challenges ultimately result in project failure. But let's just see what's happening for you at the moment. So they're just the votes are just coming in. It's looking like a two-horse race. Oh, there's another one just joined in. A third horse. It's great. This, I tell you, it's I said last night. It's like watching going to the races. Okay, I think we might have all the votes in, and the results are number one: lack of clear objective.
Yep.
And I know we've been on projects where that's been the case.
Yep.
sort that out as first thing. Lack of look at that, there's a late vote come in. So lack of clear objective is now tied for first place with insufficient engagement.
Okay.
And then third is lack of sponsorship, and fourth is too much bureaucracy. So insufficient budget is not necessarily figured amongst this particular group, but that's their answers. So who was going to pick up from there?
No, I will, and I've got a slide, Simon. Some historic research, but we'll talk about that as well if you put that up. I think it's interesting actually. One of the we're dealing with a client fairly recently, and they were saying one of their big challenges was project management bureaucracy, and our survey says, well, it's probably not as big an issue as it may be. I don't know. I think it depends on perspective, really. We've all worked with the sponsor who says, "So you just make this happen." Now I've got, on my slide here, top management sponsorship in IBM's research in 2008. They said that was the key issue. That's really good that a lot of people concur with that. I think the point about using IBM's research is it's a good encapsulation of the whole. Every consultancy of any scale does this type of survey either annually or every 2 or 3 years, using it to some extent as a vehicle to actually help clients understand the key things that make change fail. If you look at this, and the presentation we've done for you here is, to deal with the soft and hard factors. We said all of these top 5 or 6 areas. Sponsorship, we talked about employee involvement, engaging people in change, honesty and timely communication. They're all about the soft things. They're all the hard things to deal with. The more tangible things, the more things about process and getting an organisation design in place and getting the financials right and so on, really are less of an issue from a change failing point of view. Still, with the talk about sponsorship, and in this particular survey, sponsorship was the top line. I mean, I've got a great example. I was working with a sponsor some time ago, and we'd had the team working all through the weekend to deliver whatever the changes were, lots of technical things and so on. Said to the sponsor, look, the guys have been in for every evening, every weekend. You need to do something with them. Perhaps take them for something simple like a beer and a pizza. The sponsor said, yeah, that's fine. Just tell me when I need to do it. There's a real lack of sponsor engagement. So however hard I was working with that sponsor, just really hadn't got the actually top sponsorship role. Didn't really understand that the people involved in change need to see their leaders leading from the front, actively promoting the change, talking to their peers around the board table and saying, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing and please help us with this and so on. I think that's so critical. Part of my challenge then really was, well, how do I coach the sponsor? Not necessarily overtly. And that's something that as project managers we always have to deal with, is you're going to have to coach people around you, but you can't always do it overtly. You've got to do it covertly. We'll talk a bit later about some of the sort of more technical things we can do to make sure that we're actually delivering the right things at the right time in terms of engagement with all stakeholders involved in a particular change program. The third one I think I'm going to pick up here is around honest and timely communication. It was, if people don't trust you as project managers, they don't trust you as a sponsor, they don't trust you as a change team, don't trust you as a change maker, then really they're never ever going to engage with the change. There's always loads and loads of examples of this. I I worked with a HR director some time ago and said to him, okay, well, we've gone off and we've designed a nice organisational design, and unfortunately there's only one role for you and your peer, so we don't need both of you. That didn't go down terribly well. Was probably part of my naivety of thinking, oh, this guy's a good sponsor and I've been working with him and we had a great relationship. But for him personally, he didn't like the honesty. He didn't like and he didn't actually understand from that communication was there. It's not just about there's only one job. There's lots of other opportunities. So you've got to actually wrap up the whole. I think the point we really needed to bring out here is all of the surveys that in all of the but undertaken principally by the major consultancies, all put the people aspects as the principal reasons why programs fail. I know Nigel had a few things to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, if we sort of turn it around, so if you look at that slide there, that's all about what makes change successful. Simon, if you could move on to the next slide, and this is some information I got from the Office of Government Commerce, and it's turning on its head, really. Why do projects fail? So it's approaching the same problem from a different angle. And we've already talked about lack of clear purpose or objective, and David's talked very eloquently about senior management ownership or support. I mean, interesting enough, I've got an example of a very positive one where when I was in the Navy, I was tasked with a Navy-wide major program, and I was very fortunate that I had a very senior admiral who was the sponsor for that program and was absolutely hands-on and supported it, and made sure that everybody else took it as seriously as he did. So in some ways that made my life a lot easier, because everybody in the program or the project knew that the senior sponsor was absolutely on the case and would be on their case if they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. So that was very helpful. Lack of whole life value for money approach. So I think that goes back to clear purpose and objectives. So, is there a clear benefit that's going to come out of this project? Have we actually articulated that in our business case? Effective leadership we talked about, we'll talk about that later. The engagement one is interesting. I did a big project in the NHS a few years ago, and it was a big change project, and interesting enough, my line manager at the time was a very intelligent and capable person, but they came from an engineering background, and so quite process driven, and was very much looking for sort of, you know, Microsoft project Gantt charts and stuff like that. And when I said the way to achieve success on this project was to go and talk to people, they showed a good deal of skepticism, I'll say, that wasn't going to cut it. But actually, 12 months later, they had the good grace to turn around and say, actually, you were right, because the only way this project was going to succeed was by actually talking to people and making sure that we had good relationships. So I think that engagement with stakeholders is really important. In terms of lack of skills in both project and risk management, yes, I think that's important. You've got to have the technical skills of whatever project management system you're using and understanding risk. And I think risk is a key area where a lot of people don't really understand risk management and risk mitigation. And the lack of control and monitoring systems. And again, that's just a processy thing, making sure you've got those things in place. So I think those are the, from the Office of Government Commerce, what are the reasons why a lot of public sector projects fail. But later on, we'll be going back to the person and the individual and the people aspects, the soft skills, as David said it. So I think that covers off the projects bit now. And I think, Simon, I think you've got another question for David, haven't you?
Yes, I have. So thanks for telling us why projects fail. And I think that the estimates are usually something like 70% of projects fail to achieve their original objectives. And I always insist on putting in those last two words, original objectives, because most projects actually succeed. They get there by hook or by crook. It's just that they cost a lot of money, a lot more maybe than they originally envisaged, and they engage far few people, and they don't necessarily achieve all the results that they were looking for. But generally, teams will do everything they can to deliver. So I think when I see something about the stats around project failure, I always try to ensure that the teams that are delivering don't feel that that's necessarily wholly what's the word I'm looking for? Something that that's said against them and what they're trying to achieve. It's not a criticism. That's the word. Got there in the end. So, as I say, we've covered why projects fail. So, David, what can we do to ensure success?
Well, I think I've got a slide for this actually, Simon.
Okay.
When I'm talking to project people, and we do training of people who are not natural project managers who actually have operational roles, try and wrap it up in 4 areas. I refer to them as the 4 R's. If you remember back to primary school and so on, probably people talked about the 3 R's of reading, writing, arithmetic. Well, I've got 4 R's. The point here is, can we describe for us as project people, whether you work as a project manager or not, and working as a change maker generally, the things that we really must do to be successful. I put always at the top of the list is around rigor and ritual, and you could argue there are 2 R's there, but it's about actually always doing what you say you'll do. This is really important, because if those people involved in the change actually know what's going to happen, know when it's going to happen, actually know that every Monday morning we focus on the progress against plan, or we do our highlight reporting, or we talk about the way that we're engaging with people that week, then it's really helpful for everybody involved to say, that's what's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. I know it happens every week. Really, you thinking about in an agile environment, and this is not about agile today, but it's in an agile environment, you always do the same things in terms of scrums at the same time of day. And you probably do them every day, or you may do them twice a day. It really depends on the program. There's lots of things that you've got to, in terms of building that rigor and ritual, you need to put in place for your program all of the governance and control. If you've got a big project, you'll have a PMO, or program, you'll have a PMO, and there's lots and lots of things a project management office can do for you to help you through this. But it's more about making sure that you've ticked off the important things for the change. We'll talk a bit more about the soft stuff in a while. This is probably where you worry at the moment about the hard stuff. Have you got a sensible plan? Do you know where you are against plan? Do you have the mechanisms to actually monitor all of that? Does everybody else believe you monitor that? And that's it. That's really quite important. Back to the soft stuff. We'll talk a bit later about how we used our Delta model to actually help us through the soft stuff. This is really the land of Prince and APM, Prosky, all of the principal project management techniques. One of the things, and I touched upon it earlier, I think, is you've got to be really wary of overwhelming bureaucracy. And I said earlier about a client who said, well, one of our challenges, we have a lot of project management bureaucracy. Because it's in the manual, you don't have to do everything. And that's one of the things I think good things about Prince, for instance, is it's a great process, great manual. OGC have spent millions and millions and millions of pounds developing it, but you don't have to use it absolutely religiously. You've got to really think about the environment that you're working in and what is actually necessary. There's also something else to think about there is, well, the broader community don't need to know everything that's going on. So if you have to have a process that manages a specific aspect to your program, simple financials or something like that, not everybody needs to see the actual volume of material and activity that goes behind that. It's a bit about the swan, isn't it? Of they just see the swan gliding across the water. They don't need to understand. As soon as you actually show everybody everything, you then start to get there's a huge amount of bureaucracy. Why do we need to do this? And we know as project people that you do need to do a lot of this stuff. I think the second R is about relationships. Now, this is the people stop change. You need to actually manage the change. And we always talk, when we're talking to clients, we talk about there are three types of project manager, aren't there? There's the one that's take that hill, never mind the casualties. Don't worry about the people aspects of change. Are they going to be successful? They may be, but they're unlikely to be able to deliver enduring change, deliver the real benefits that you're expecting. One of the points is, not about project management. It's about delivering the benefits, but those benefits have to endure, of course. The second type is, well, here's the project manager, and they absolutely focus on the bureaucracy and producing the PID and producing the exception reporting and whatever else is in your project management process. They're creating an industry. That's sort of two extremes of, let's just take the hill, never mind the casualties, don't worry about anything as long as we've delivered whatever the changes in terms of system or process or whatever it is. And there's the other end, which is, okay, let's do this absolutely by the letter and make sure that we've delivered 100% of the outcome that the client or the sponsor is expecting. The third type of project manager is the change maker. It's the person who's actually worrying about how do we make sure that we deliver the enduring benefits, recognizing that it's principally, I'll use the word principally people that stop change, and that we've got to be able to deal with their egos and their personalities, and we had a good webinar yesterday about using Clarity 4D and different types of ways of dealing with people. Under the relationships heading, I put a lot of the dealing with the stakeholders, putting in place stakeholder analysis and the stakeholder mapping, the comms and engagement planning, things like we talked earlier, coaching sponsors and leaders, helping them make your projects be successful. Large part of this also is actually making sure that you actually have a vision for your end state, and getting people engaged in that and understanding that and helping them develop the vision as a team. And we're talking to a client shortly, hopefully, around how do we get that vision built from the team, the people affected by the change. The third R is risk management. Managing risk is a huge part of any of our business lives, whether you have operational roles, strategic roles, or project type roles. And we need to put in place the risk management processes. We need to actually develop what those risks are, and we need to work through and make sure. I mean, there are lots of mnemonics around this area. PESTLE is the one that people tend to talk about, which is look for the political risks, the economic risks, the social risks, the technical risks, the legal risks, the environmental risks, but actually making sure that we do understand the risk environment that we're working in. It's a huge opportunity to engage those affected by the change. A lot of project people would actually hold a workshop, and they get the project team together to talk about risks, unless they don't identify all the risks. you've got a great opportunity to involve people affected by the change. Get them to tell you what the risks are. Really, great examples are particularly if you're changing from system to system. There's all of the risks around undocumented processes. Yeah. Any system won't actually quite do what is required of it over time, and people put in place all of the workarounds. Those are the sorts of risks that you can identify better by bringing people in, getting them engaged in your program, your project, and getting them to actually, well, how do we actually mitigate these risks? So risk management, my third R. The last one, in the few minutes that we have to talk about this, is around responsibilities. And I suppose one of the questions people ask is, okay, what's the difference between accountability and responsibility? Well, I worked with a sponsor once, and he actually dealt with this and wrapped it up nicely. He said, I'm accountable, I get sacked if this goes wrong. You're responsible, talking to me as the program manager, and you get sacked if this goes wrong. But basically, the expectation of the accountability was, I'm absolutely happy to lead from the front and to work with me as the project manager to deliver the program. But the responsibility has to rest with somebody to actually drive the change through. One of the challenges is around how do we assign responsibility. And there's an old saying of good fences make good neighbours. This is about can we ever be responsible as a team, or do we have responsibility individually for aspects of the change? If you can actually build your team and look at, think about team-based project management, and we'll talk about some of that later perhaps. Get the responsibility built into the team. This is how do we build the team to actually deliver the change? How do we work together to make sure that we haven't missed anything? How do we work together to make sure we've got the rigor and ritual in place, and so on?
That's great. Thank you, David. I think that's a really good grounding in the fundamentals of getting the approach right. And what we're going to discuss with you in a moment is how we as change makers go about ensuring successful delivery on the projects that we work on. But before we do that, we've got another poll for you, which is, I'll just put it up here. Do your current project management systems, e.g. Prince, MSP, APM, deal sufficiently with the people aspects of delivering change or delivering projects? So, yeah, fire away. So while those are coming in, Nigel, did you have any perspective on the 4 R's, the fundamentals there that David was covering?
No, it's a good way of remembering it, and I think what we'll see when we go to some of the later material is that that second bullet, the relationships, is the one that really makes a difference. The soft stuff that is really hard, and I think that's, you'll see that when we get into the Delta change model and the team-based project management, that actually it's trying to get those soft elements correct that's going to make the difference.
I agree. Well, it's a resounding no on the question.
Well, that's handy, isn't it?
That's good news, because
that sort of plays into our hands a little bit, because that's what our approach is all about. And what I'm just going to share now and just introduce, and then hand over to Nigel, is the Delta change model. So this was born out of lots and lots and lots of projects, and trying to work out what were the essential components that were working against us, if you like, as a team. And invariably, as both David and Nigel have already explained, it's the people stuff. So this is really saying, look, we've got some process changes we need to do. We have some technology changes we need to do. There might even be people changes we need to do, but it's how we do that that's important. And so this, I designed this model a few years back, and we as a team now use it because it basically encapsulates the people challenge. And as a result, we think, well, we know from our own experience that this means more successful delivery of massive change projects, but also small, like what I like to call small delta projects. Just the smallest changes can be put in place very quickly if you get your head around the 5 elements of the delta change model. And I know Nigel's going to explain that for us now. So, Nigel,
yeah,
you.
Thanks. Okay, so very quickly then, just you can see the delta leading change model there in front of you, and we're looking at the 5 elements. So very quickly, diagnose, right at the beginning of the project, we're looking at all the external and internal factors, and David's already mentioned the PESTEL model, and that's a good one to use. Or is it that there's a burning platform that we need to get off? Do we need a step change process here? But I think the important bit, part of the diagnosis, which very often gets left behind, is the reviewing with the stakeholders. So is this just something that we thought about, or is it something that our stakeholders are telling us, either internal or external? And if we engage with our stakeholders, then very often they will help us to diagnose the problem and the issue, and help us to identify what we're going to do about it. And then we can look at things like, what is the new future going to look like? What will the benefits be? And can we look at a map of getting from here to there? And then moving on to the engage side, that's once we've identified or diagnosed the problem, it's just understanding that we can't do this alone. And I think one of our colleagues talked on a previous webinar this week about, you know, the sort of the half dozen that sit in a cold, dark room somewhere with towels around their heads and come out with a vision and a strategy, and then tell everybody that that's what's going to happen. Well, actually, you need to engage with everybody, because there's nothing worse than doing things to people. So get a change team, get key people involved, and make sure that they're engaged in the process at every level, so that they can see the need for change as well, and it isn't just something that's being imposed from on high. Make sure they understand what the goal and the purpose is, and don't forget to use every type of communication media here. Interestingly enough, when I was doing a major change program in the Navy, somebody said to me, "Don't send words to the Royal Marines, because the Royal Marines don't read." It wasn't that Royal Marines can't read. I'd just like to make that clear. They can read, but actually their whole life and their whole operational life revolves around verbal briefings and doing things on a verbal basis. So actually, if you're going to communicate with them, communicate in a verbal way. So think of every type of communication and make sure that you repeat it often and that it's kept up to date. And then if we move on to the lead side.
Could I?
Yeah, sure, please chip in.
I was just thinking of another example there. About 8 or 9 years ago, we're doing a lot of work in hospitals to transform major pathways, major sort of patient pathways around the hospitals. And you'll often hear people say, if you really want to know what's going on, go to the coalface, go and ask the people who are actually doing the job for their opinions. And what we did in the engage phase that really worked and sped up the process of change was we engaged and we got into the room everybody that was either involved in the current process or had a stake, if you like, in the anticipated future state. So with everybody in the room, we were really engaging people on designing the change. So it was never ever going to be something that happened to them, because they were in the room designing what could work, what wouldn't work, based on their actual experience. Now, obviously, there's an element of you need to still challenge their current way of thinking, because, of course, if you just continue with that level of thinking, you're not necessarily going to get to a new place. However, they were the right people to be involved in so what we call blue sky thinking, because they absolutely knew what their patients wanted in that particular context. So it was the use of the word engage there is very specific, and it's meant to identify that this is real engagement. It's getting everybody involved in a tangible way that's going to make a difference to the outcome, not just a communication process. And as a result of that work, I mean, we managed to generate millions of pounds worth of savings in one hospital in particular in the Midlands, just by virtue of the, and when I say we, it was literally one or two of us as change makers and about 10 people in an internal team. So that was the real we. It was the people who were there delivering the services to patients day in, day out, but also reinventing their service for the future.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I think that's a really good point, because moving on to the next bit, which is about leading, part of the leading skill set in a process like this is to make sure that we empower people and actually take their results and trust them to come up with the right answer. I had a very unfortunate experience where I did something very similar to you, and we got everybody in the room, apart from the key sponsor who decided that he didn't have all day to spend there. We came up with a beautiful solution at the end, and he just came in and said, "No, I don't like that," and said it's not going to happen. So I think if part of the leadership is actually having the courage to actually empower people and to give them the necessary authority to actually make the changes. So empower them. Don't let them get bogged down with a lengthy decision-making process. Very often in lean workshops, it's, you know, we're going to have a workshop today and we're going to implement the changes tomorrow. So that's the sort of thing we need to be looking at.
Yeah.
And also quick wins. And I think the other big thing about leadership in a project like this is, particularly at the senior level, it's clearing the way. It's making sure that we remove barriers, because as David often says, it's people that stop change. But so you've got to be looking out for those barriers, whether they're people or physical barriers, and you've got to be the person that unblocks those barriers so that the team can get on with the business. If we move on to the transform element, it's really maintaining momentum on this side and making sure that any obvious success is highlighted to encourage people to carry on. Because you'll very often find there's a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning, but what people very often forget is that, particularly if there's a step change process going on here, it takes time. And if you read some of John Cotter's material, you'll hear that him talk about years for major step change programs, not weeks. So I think it's making sure that people understand that that transformational journey, you know, could be quite a long one, but we also have to implement quick wins as soon as we can so that we maintain the momentum and people can see it is making a difference, and then keep pushing.
I was going to say something that's really current is around the transformation of culture. And there's so much that one has to do to actually, as Nigel just said, to actually develop a culture and move the culture from wherever it is now to somewhere else. Lots and lots of practical things in terms of transformation, but really loads and loads of hearts and minds, leadership it from the front, engaging people, describing how we need the culture to look to be successful in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in terms of invitations to tender, quite a lot of that stuff is around culture change. Yeah. And culture leadership rather than sort of process change, if you like.
Yeah.
So, and I think, Nigel, the key to successful delivery in terms of transformation is actually in the first 3 steps. If you get the diagnosis and the engagement and the leadership right, then actually the transformation and the acceleration, which we'll discuss later, is easy.
Yeah.
And the only challenges you get in those areas that would otherwise derail you are caused by something that didn't happen earlier in the process. So if you focus hard on the left-hand side of the triangle, then it literally is all downhill from there.
Nicely put. Yes. Okay. And so just to wrap this up then, if you look at the Accelerate side, it is really about once the change program is underway and is coming towards its natural conclusion, it's don't revert back to old ways. It's making sure we maintain that momentum and actually embrace that new culture and embed those new behaviors that are really important to making sure that the change is maintained. And it may be that as part of that you need to implement a continuous improvement program of some sort. So rather than a step change program, for which project management is particularly useful, maybe some form of incremental continuous improvement program to maintain the momentum down the line. And again, staff development and staff inclusion in that is really important. And it's important for the organisation to invest in those new skills and new behaviours to make sure that we maintain that change as we go on. So I think that wraps up the Delta model for us. So yeah, Simon.
I wanted to highlight as well, in that Accelerate phase, it's about, as Nigel says, having that team of people who can take forward the approach to change in such a way that the next change is more readily accepted, and the DEL phases of the project are really accelerated. So we actually start work on the acceleration phase back in the engagement phase. So in the way we do that is by identifying with the project team and the sponsor some people who are inside the organization that can be change makers for future developments. And what we do is we actually involve them in the process of engagement and leadership development for the specific project that we're doing with them in the first place. So we use the whole project as their learning canvas, if you like, for the process of becoming great change makers inside the organization. So it's a nice, easy process to remember, and one that we find reaps huge rewards in terms of the sustainability that David mentioned right up front when we were looking at the 4 R's. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we've got something for you, who are the people who are watching right now. We've got something called a Project Management Gold Standard Health Check for you to download. So this is something that you can use to see how you're doing right now with regard to your projects. And it might just stimulate some questions in your head about things that you might need to change, things that might be useful to have a chat with someone about. And both Nigel and David and Malcolm, who was on the call yesterday, they're all available to help you to think about what's going on in your business right now. So as well as that Project Management Gold Standard Health Check, which you can download just by clicking the button there, I'll give you another 10 seconds to do that. And then what I'm going to do is also offer some of our time. We know that quite often with projects, it's not that they need major overhaul, but it's the minor tweaks. And so we're going to offer some of our time for your projects, a minor tweak, and if there's a major challenge you want to just discuss, then we are going to make some time available for you via a 30-minute call. So you can just give us a call, or schedule a call rather, and that's sort of like a hotline, and it'll come through to us, and we can then schedule a time to have a chat with you about any challenges you're having right now. So again, just click on that button if you'd like to chat with us, and you can schedule a call after the webinar. Okay, who would like to talk about the next item?
Well, it's a team. I'll just cover this quickly because it's about the team-based project management, and that health check that you spoke about will be a good lead into that. But if you look on our website, there is a a team-based project management process that we use. And I think just some of the key points of that are that it does concentrate on the people and not the system. And I think that's the key element of our team-based project management. And it talks about effective communication between project members. It talks about all the soft stuff that we've been talking about for the last few minutes. And I think it emphasizes that the tools and the processes are enablers. They are not the project. And I think we've all been there where, you know, we think a project is a Gantt chart from some form of, you know, software system. It isn't, actually. That's just a tool. It's an enabler. We need to understand, as David has said a number of times, that, you know, change is all about changing people and processes, and that getting the people on board is going to be the key thing. And it talks about developing team members' soft skills as well. How do they interact with people? And that ties into our Clarity 4D thing we were talking about yesterday. So, you know, we can put both of those together to help people to actually look at the team as a whole and what their team dynamics and interactions are, what their relationships are, and that will help them to actually make them more effective as team members, more effective communicators and engagers in such that actually they can deliver the project more effectively as well. So that team-based project management, I just encourage you to go and have a look on the website, and that's something that we can help people with as well.
Excellent. Right, let's have a look at some questions. If you have any questions, please just type them in the box now. We've got one from Nicola. When does a project become something that requires full-blown project management? So, Nigel, do you want to kick us off, and then we'll ask David?
Depends what you mean by full-blown project management as opposed to half-blown project management. I think it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning about, you know, when is a project management approach suitable? And to me, it's when you're looking at a significant change required and you've got a clear output and difference that's going to be made. So if you can put a business case around it, and if you can come out with clear aims and objectives and clear accountability for some form of change, some form of output, and I think that's when you need to think about project management. If you're just tweaking an existing process or maybe making a small incremental change, then I think that's probably you know, just addressing business as usual, or you may be looking at some form of a continuous improvement system, which we can also help with if required.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I think for me is I've spent quite a lot of time working with operational teams and providing training or coaching or mentoring or all of those things. Well, for instance, in a one-day training course for an operational team, we've been able to actually describe this is the dynamic of a project. Those people can go away and deliver change within their own environments with a bit of support, perhaps, but they can deliver change. There's using the 4R type structure that we talked about. It's really about, I think Nigel just said it. Do you know what your end game is? Do you know what your future state? Do you have your blueprint in place? And do you actually need lots of project managers, program managers, technicians, to actually deliver that change? Or is it something that you can reasonably do in your normal business life? There comes a point when a project needs a management layer, and I think that's when you can start to talk about full-blown project management, but don't create an industry unless it's absolutely necessary.
Thanks, David. So the next question is from Jax. Will the Delta approach work with existing systems and processes?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it will, because I think it's an approach rather than a process. And I think we've already said that, you know, the thing about the team-based project management and the Delta approach is that the tools and the processes are not the project; they're enablers. So if you want to use MS Project, or if you want to use any of the others that are on the market, or any other type of even if you just want to use an Excel spreadsheet, I don't think that matters. I think it's important that you get the approach right, and I think the Delta approach is what we're really pushing here, rather than, you know, this is a substitute for MS Project. It isn't. Behind the Delta approach, you will have systems and processes and enablers, but to me, the Delta approach is the important thing, and it doesn't really matter which particular software package you use with it.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'd tell you, taking a slightly different spin on the response to that. If you think about, I mean, you know, we've said it once before, I think about Prince and APM and MSP and Prosecute and all of these things. They don't deal with the people aspects of change to the level of that we're asking people to think about the change and the people. And that's where Delta comes in. It's something that blends its way into the way that you manage your projects on a day-by-day basis.
That's right. Thanks, David. Another question here from Mal. Can you talk a bit about the power of milestone planning versus task planning? David, you're there.
Yeah, I'd love to. I think this is part of the rigor and ritual debate, isn't it? For most people involved in a project, actually understanding what the milestones are and understanding the progress against those milestones and expecting I talked about a highlight report every Monday morning about this is where we're at. Milestone planning is more than adequate. For members of the team who are having to deliver against those milestones, they need to get down to levels of planning that most people involved, most stakeholders involved in the change really don't care about, to be honest.
There's just levels of granularity.
Levels of granularity, and I said earlier, you don't want to expose everything to everyone because they will give you all of the challenges that around. This is creating industry costs, etc., and they'll be trying to pull you back to unstructured project management, which is probably not what you want to do.
Fantastic. We have reached the end of the webinar for this lunchtime, and I'd just like to quickly highlight what's coming up this evening. It's all about the individuals this evening, how to make change happen. And so if that's you, whether that's at work or whether it's you in life, how can you make change happen? What we'll be doing is we'll be looking at all of the principles that we've picked up this week. So we've looked at productivity and mastering time. We looked at building your resilience. We looked at how motivation is a key factor and communication and engagement skills. Yesterday we looked at the specific elements around bringing vision and strategy to life, and then Nigel and I discussed your personal leadership approach. All of those things really combine with this lunchtime's discussion on how do we make projects, how do we deliver projects. All of those things come together in this evening's talk in terms of how do we make change happen. So look forward to seeing as many of you back here at 7 o'clock this evening. But other than that, it just remains for me to thank David and Nigel for a fantastic webinar. Really enjoyed that. Got lots of great points out of there. Thanks, guys. And say bye for the rest of you. Now, remember, if you're watching on the replay, please put your questions there in the chat box. They will get through to us. And Nigel and David, and as I said, Malcolm from yesterday's webinar, they will all be very keen to get back to you and help if they can. So it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
And me.
Fantastic. All the best.
Cheers, guys.